The bullet had entered her left shoulder blade from behind, ripped through muscle and sinew, and exited just above her collarbone, leaving a crater that no amount of time would ever fully erase. Zelda Sutherland pressed her fingers against the high collar of her cotton blouse, feeling the ridges of scar tissue beneath the fabric as the wagon jolted over another rut in the dusty New Mexico road. It was June 1881, and the landscape stretched before them in endless waves of ochre and sage, the Sandia Mountains rising purple in the distance. "Careful with that equipment," Harold Pemberton barked from the driver's seat, not bothering to turn around. "Those glass plates cost more than you make in a month." Zelda steadied the wooden crates containing the photographic supplies, her hands moving with practiced efficiency despite the constant jostling. She had been Pemberton's assistant for 8 months now, ever since she had fled Kansas City with nothing but the clothes on her back and enough fear to fuel a westbound train ticket. The photographer had hired her without asking too many questions, though his eyes had lingered on the way she flinched when he raised his hand too quickly, the way she always positioned herself with her back to walls. "Yes, sir," she replied quietly, arranging the bottles of collodion and silver nitrate so they would not crash together. At 22, Zelda had learned that silence was often the safest response, that making herself small and useful could keep the world at bay. Placidus appeared on the horizon like a mirage, a collection of adobe buildings huddled together against the high desert plateau. The town was small, perhaps 200 souls, and existed primarily to serve the ranchers and miners who worked the surrounding territory. Pemberton had been commissioned to photograph the wedding of a cattle baron's daughter, a job that promised enough money to keep them in supplies through the summer. The wagon rolled past the general store, the saloon with its peeling paint, a modest church with a cross that cast long shadows in the afternoon sun. A few residents paused to watch them pass, their faces weathered by wind and sun. Zelda kept her eyes down, though she could feel their gazes like insects crawling across her skin. They pulled up in front of a boarding house, a 2-story structure that looked cleaner than most. Pemberton tied off the reins and jumped down with the agility of a man who prided himself on his vigor, though Zelda knew he was pushing 50. She waited for permission before climbing down herself, then immediately set to work unloading their equipment. "I will arrange our accommodations," Pemberton announced, straightening his coat. "You will bring everything inside and ensure nothing is damaged. The wedding is in 3 days, which gives us time to scout locations and set up our portable darkroom." "Yes, sir." He disappeared through the door, leaving Zelda alone with the wagon. She had just lifted the first heavy crate when a voice rumbled from somewhere to her left. "That looks like it weighs more than you do." Zelda nearly dropped the crate. She spun, heart hammering, and found herself staring at a wall of leather and muscle. The man was enormous, easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to block out the sun. His hair fell past his shoulders in waves the color of oak bark, tied back with a leather cord. His face was all sharp angles and rough planes, covered with several days of beard growth, but his eyes were an unexpected blue, pale as a winter sky. He wore buckskin trousers and a leather vest over a shirt that strained against the muscles of his chest and arms. Everything about him spoke of raw power, of a life lived in wild places. "I have it," Zelda said quickly, clutching the crate tighter despite the way it made her shoulder ache. The man studied her for a moment, those blue eyes missing nothing. Then he reached out and simply took the crate from her hands, lifting it as though it weighed nothing at all. "Where do you want it?" "I can manage, truly," Zelda protested, but he was already heading toward the boarding house door. She hurried after him, acutely aware of how small she was next to him, how vulnerable. Her instinct was to run, to put distance between herself and this stranger, but he had their equipment. Inside, Pemberton was arguing with the landlady about the price of rooms. He broke off when the mountain man entered, his expression flickering between annoyance and wariness. "Who are you?" Pemberton demanded. "Just helping," the man said, setting the crate down with surprising gentleness. His voice had a rough quality, as though he did not use it often. He turned to Zelda. "There's more?" She nodded mutely, and he headed back outside. Pemberton grabbed her arm as she moved to follow, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "I did not give you permission to solicit assistance. We do not need charity from some filthy trapper." "I did not ask him, sir," Zelda said, keeping her voice steady. "He simply started helping." Pemberton released her with a grunt and returned to his negotiations. Zelda fled outside, rubbing her arm. The mountain man was already loading himself up with crates, 2 under each arm. He glanced at her, then at the spot where Pemberton had grabbed her, and something flickered in his eyes. "Your employer?" he asked. "Yes, I'm his photographic assistant." "He treats you poorly." It was not a question. Zelda did not know how to respond, so she picked up a smaller case and followed him back inside. They worked in silence, the mountain man carrying the heavy equipment while Zelda handled the more delicate items. He moved with a grace surprising for his size, careful not to knock into door frames or stumble on the stairs. When everything was unloaded, Zelda found herself standing in the dusty street with him, the afternoon sun painting everything gold. Up close, she could see the scars that marked his hands and forearms, the evidence of a hard life. There was a knife at his belt, a rifle strapped to the horse that stood patiently nearby. Thank you," Zelda said. "For your help?" He nodded, his gaze lingering on her face. "What is your name?" "Zelda Sutherland." "Owen Ironwood." He said it simply, without flourish. "You are not from here." "No, Missouri originally. Kansas City most recently." She did not mention what had happened there, the reason she had fled. "We travel for Mr. Pemberton's work. Weddings, mostly. Important occasions." Owen nodded again. "You know photography?" "I assist. I prepare the plates, mix the chemicals, help with the positioning. Mr. Pemberton does the actual photographing." "But you know how?" The question surprised her. "I have watched him enough times. I suppose I could do it, but I have never tried." "You should." Owen shifted, and Zelda realized he was uncomfortable, not used to long conversations. A woman should know a trade, be able to support herself. "I have thought the same thing," Zelda admitted. Then Pemberton's voice bellowed from inside, calling her name with clear irritation, and she flinched. "I must go. Thank you again, Mr. Ironwood." "Owen," he said, "just Owen." She nodded and hurried inside, but she could feel his eyes on her back until she disappeared through the door. The next 2 days passed in a flurry of preparation. Pemberton was demanding at the best of times, but the pressure of an important commission made him insufferable. Zelda mixed chemicals until her fingers were stained black, prepared dozens of glass plates, and endured his criticism without comment. She had learned long ago that defending herself only made things worse. They scouted locations around Placitas, finding a spot near the church that had good natural light. Pemberton wanted everything perfect, and Zelda scrambled to meet his exacting standards. Her shoulder ached constantly in the dry heat, the scar tissue pulling tight. She caught herself massaging it more than once and forced her hand down, unwilling to draw attention. She saw Owen twice more, once from a distance as he rode into town with pelts strapped to his horse. He lived in the mountains, she learned from the boarding house landlady, a woman named Mrs. Chen who liked to gossip while serving meals. He was a trapper and hunter, brought in meat and furs to trade, kept to himself mostly. He had a cabin somewhere up in the high country, though no one seemed to know exactly where. "Strange man," Mrs. Chen said, shaking her head. "Been here about 2 years. Polite enough, but those eyes see everything, like a wolf watching." The second time Zelda saw him, she was in the general store, buying thread to repair a tear in her skirt. Owen was trading pelts with the proprietor, his movements economical and precise. He glanced up when she entered, and something in his expression softened fractionally. He nodded to her, and she nodded back, a strange warmth spreading through her chest. The wedding day arrived, with cloudless skies and brutal heat. Zelda was up before dawn, helping Pemberton load equipment into a borrowed wagon. The ceremony would be at a ranch 5 miles outside town, at the sprawling hacienda of Don Alejandro Martinez, whose daughter was marrying the son of another prominent ranching family. The hacienda was impressive, a white adobe structure with a red tile roof, surrounded by cottonwood trees that provided blessed shade. Already people were arriving in their finest clothes, a mix of Hispanic families who had been in New Mexico for generations and newer Anglo arrivals. Zelda helped Pemberton set up his camera on a tripod, positioning it to capture the ceremony that would take place in the courtyard. The work was familiar, almost meditative. Zelda could lose herself in the technical details, the precise measurements and chemical preparations that resulted in a captured moment frozen in silver and glass. She prepared the plates with practiced ease, coating them in collodion and sensitizing them in silver nitrate, working in the portable darkroom tent they had erected under a tree. The ceremony was beautiful. The bride wore white lace, and the groom looked nervous and proud. Pemberton snapped exposure after exposure, barking orders at Zelda, who rushed to keep him supplied with fresh plates. She was exhausted by the time the formal photographs were done, her dress soaked with sweat, her shoulders screaming. The reception was held in a large barn that had been decorated with flowers and ribbons. Musicians played and people danced, and the air smelled of roasted meat and fresh tortillas. Pemberton disappeared to drink with the other men, leaving Zelda to guard the equipment. She found a quiet corner and collapsed onto a hay bale, rolling her aching shoulder. "You are hurt," Zelda jerked upright. Owen stood a few feet away, somehow having appeared without a sound. He was dressed slightly better than she had seen him before, his buckskins clean, his shirt actually buttoned. His hair was tied back, revealing the strong line of his jaw. "I'm fine," she said automatically. Owen moved closer and she forced herself not to retreat. He crouched down so they were at eye level, those pale blue eyes studying her with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare. "You favor your left shoulder. You have been massaging it all day when you think no one is watching. It is old, an injury from before. The heat makes it ache." "What kind of injury?" Zelda looked away. "Does it matter?" "It might." Owen was silent for a moment. "I have some salve, helps with pain, old wounds, made from plants that grow in the high country. I could bring it to you." "Why would you do that?" "Because you are in pain." He said it as though it were the most obvious thing in the world. Zelda felt something crack inside her chest, a fissure in the wall she had built so carefully. "I do not understand you." "What is there to understand? You are hurt. I can help." Owen stood, his full height towering over her. "I will bring the salve tomorrow, to the boarding house." He walked away before she could protest, his broad back disappearing into the crowd. Zelda sat there, hand pressed to her shoulder, feeling the steady throb of old damage beneath her palm. True to his word, Owen appeared at the boarding house the next morning. Zelda was helping Mrs. Chen with breakfast dishes when he knocked. The landlady answered, and Zelda heard the low rumble of Owen's voice, then Mrs. Chen calling for her. Owen stood on the porch, holding a small tin. "The salve," he said, offering it to her. Zelda took it, the metal warm from his hand. "Thank you. What do I owe you?" "Nothing. I cannot simply take it." "You can." Owen shifted his weight. "It is not difficult to make. I have more." Zelda opened the tin and sniffed. It smelled of herbs and beeswax, not unpleasant. "What is in it?" "Pine resin, yarrow, arnica, other things." He gestured vaguely. "My mother taught me. She was Jicarilla Apache, new plants." "Was? She died when I was young. Fever." Owen said it matter-of-factly, but Zelda heard the old grief underneath. "My father was a trapper. Scottish. He died too, eventually. Bear attack." "I'm sorry." Owen shrugged. "It was a long time ago. I've been alone since I was 17. I'm 30 now. I'm used to it." Zelda did math quickly. 13 years alone in the wilderness. It explained the way he moved, the watchful silence, the economy of speech. "That sounds lonely." "Sometimes." His eyes found hers. "Sometimes it is safer to be alone." The words resonated through her. "Yes," she said softly. "Sometimes it is." They stood there for a moment, two damaged people recognizing something in each other. Then Pemberton's voice rang out from inside, demanding to know where Zelda was, and the moment shattered. "I have to go," she said. "Use the salve tonight, on the skin directly. It will help." She nodded and fled inside, clutching the tin like a talisman. That night, in the privacy of her small room, Zelda carefully unbuttoned her dress and slipped it off her shoulders. She stood before the small mirror, turning to see the full extent of the scarring. The exit wound was the worst, a puckered crater above her collarbone. But there was also the entry wound on her back, and the network of thinner scars that crisscrossed her left arm and shoulder where she had been cut, repeatedly, methodically, by a man who had claimed to love her. Edward Thornton, her former employer back in Kansas City, and briefly, her fiancé. He had been charming at first, attentive. By the time she realized his true nature, it was too late. The scars were his artwork, he had told her, proof that she belonged to him. The bullet had been his final gift, fired when she tried to run. She had been lucky. It had missed the bone, missed major arteries. She had survived long enough to make it to a doctor, and then survived long enough to flee west. She opened the tin Owen had given her and scooped out some of the salve. It was smooth, fragrant. She rubbed it into the worst of the scarring, working it deep into the tissue. Almost immediately, she felt warmth spreading through the area, the constant ache beginning to ease. Tears pricked her eyes. When was the last time anyone had shown her simple kindness without wanting something in return? When had anyone noticed her pain and sought to ease it? She thought of Owen's pale blue eyes, the gentleness in his rough hands as he had carried their equipment, the way he had spoken of his dead parents, the years alone, the way he had said sometimes it is safer to be alone, as though he understood exactly why she flinched at raised voices, why she kept her back to walls. Zelda slept better that night than she had in months. The next few days settled into a routine. Pemberton was in a better mood after the successful wedding photographs, which meant he was merely critical rather than cruel. They had several smaller commissions in Placitas, families wanting portraits, a merchant wanting photographs of his store. Zelda worked hard, trying to make herself indispensable. She saw Owen around town occasionally. He would nod to her, sometimes exchange a few words, but he never pushed for more. She appreciated that. She also appreciated the way his presence seemed to make other men step back, give her space. Something about Owen's size and the wildness that clung to him made people wary, respectful. One afternoon, Zelda was sent to the general store to purchase more chemicals. She was examining bottles when she heard a familiar, oily voice. "Well now, who is this?" She turned to find 3 men blocking the aisle. Ranch hands by the look of them, dusty from a day's work and smelling of whiskey despite the early hour. The one who had spoken was lean and rat-faced, with cruel eyes. "Excuse me," Zelda said, trying to move past. The rat-faced man shifted to block her. "Not friendly, are you? I was just being polite." "Please, let me pass." "What is your hurry?" One of his companions, a heavy man with a scar across his cheek, leaned closer. "We do not see many pretty girls around here. Least you could do is talk a bit." Zelda's heart was pounding, her vision starting to narrow. She knew this situation, had been in it before. It could escalate quickly. She looked around desperately for the store owner, but he had stepped into the back room. "The lady asked you to move." All 4 of them turned. Owen stood at the end of the aisle, and even though his voice was quiet, it carried absolute authority. He was not wearing his usual buckskins today. Instead, he wore rough work trousers and a shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars. His hair was loose around his shoulders, and something in his stance radiated danger. The rat-faced man straightened. "This is not your business, mountain man." "It is now." Owen walked forward, and the men actually stumbled back despite themselves. He was just that much larger, that much more intimidating. "The lady wants to be left alone. You will let her pass." "Or what?" the scarred man blustered, but his hand was edging toward his gun. Owen's hand shot out, faster than Zelda would have thought possible for a man his size. He grabbed the man's wrist before the gun cleared leather, and squeezed. The man cried out, and the gun clattered to the floor. "Or I will break every bone in your hand," Owen said, still in that quiet voice. "Then your arm. Then whatever else I feel like breaking. Do you understand?" The man nodded frantically. Owen released him and turned to the others. "Anyone else?" They shook their heads, and the 3 of them practically fell over each other, retreating from the store. Owen watched them go, then turned to Zelda. His expression softened immediately. "Are you all right?" Zelda realized she was shaking. "Yes, thank you. You keep saving me." "They are cowards, bullies." Owen picked up the dropped gun and set it on the counter. "But they will not bother you again." "How can you be sure?" "Because I will tell them what happens if they do." He said it with such simple certainty that Zelda believed him. The store owner returned from the back, took one look at Owen's face and the gun on the counter, and wisely said nothing. Zelda completed her purchases in silence, acutely aware of Owen standing nearby like a guard dog. When she had everything, he simply picked up her packages and carried them back to the boarding house. At the door, Zelda found her courage. "Would you like to have dinner? With me? Mrs. Chen serves at 6. You could join us. I mean, if you wanted. To repay you." Owen looked at her for a long moment. "You do not owe me anything." "I know, but I would like your company, if you would like mine." Something warm kindled in those pale blue eyes. I would like that. He arrived promptly at 6, cleaned up and wearing what Zelda suspected were his best clothes. Pemberton was there too, unfortunately, but he was distracted by his own importance and barely noticed Owen. Mrs. Chen served chicken with green chilies and fresh bread, and Zelda found herself relaxing as Owen sat across from her. "How long have you been a photographer's assistant?" Owen asked. 8 months. Before that, I worked as a governess and companion." She did not mention Edward, the way that job had turned into a nightmare. "I like the photography, though. There is something magical about it, capturing a moment that will last forever." "Do you think moments should last forever?" Owen asked. "Some should be forgotten." "Perhaps, but others should be remembered. Happy moments, beautiful ones." She paused. "Do you ever want your photograph taken?" "No," he said it quickly, firmly. "I do not like the idea of being captured, frozen. It is not like that. You are still free. It is just a record that you existed, that you were here." Owen considered this. "I will think about it." They talked through the meal, and Zelda found conversation flowing more easily than she had expected. Owen was quiet, but when he spoke, he was thoughtful and observant. He told her about the mountains, the wildlife, the changing seasons. She told him about the places they had traveled, the people they had photographed, carefully editing out the difficult parts. After dinner, Owen walked her upstairs to her room, which Pemberton did not like at all based on his scowl, but he said nothing. At her door, Owen paused. "I enjoyed this," he said. "So did I. Would you like to see the mountains tomorrow? I could show you some beautiful places, good for photographs perhaps." Zelda hesitated. Going alone into the wilderness with a man she barely knew should have terrified her, but somehow it did not. Owen was dangerous, yes, but not to her. She felt safer with him than she did in town, safer than she had in a long time. "I would like that very much." Owen smiled, a rare and transformative expression that made him look younger. "I will come at dawn. Bring water and a hat. It gets hot." He left, and Zelda leaned against her door, her heart doing strange things in her chest. She pressed her hand to her shoulder, feeling the scars beneath her dress, and wondered what Owen would think if he knew. If he would look at her differently. If the careful kindness would turn to pity, or worse, disgust. She pushed the thoughts away and focused on the morning, on the promise of mountains and sky, and a day spent away from Pemberton's demands. Dawn came cool and clear. Zelda dressed in her most practical clothes, borrowed a canteen from Mrs. Chen, and found Owen waiting outside with his horse and a borrowed mule. He had packed supplies in saddlebags, and he helped her mount the mule with the same careful gentleness he seemed to apply to everything around her. They rode out of Placidus as the sun painted the desert pink and gold. Owen led them east, toward the mountains that rose like sentinels above the plateau. The air smelled of sage and juniper, and birds called from the scrub. Zelda felt something loosen in her chest, a tightness she had not even realized was there. They climbed steadily, the terrain growing rockier, the vegetation shifting to pine and fir. Owen pointed out animal tracks, edible plants, the signs of seasons and storms written in the landscape. He spoke more out here than he did in town, as though the wilderness freed something in him. They stopped at a high meadow where wildflowers bloomed in riotous color. A stream ran through it, cold and clear, and the views stretched for miles. Owen helped Zelda down from the mule, and she stood there, turning slowly, taking it all in. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "Yes." But Owen was looking at her, not the view. They spread a blanket and ate the food Owen had packed, simple fare of bread and cheese and dried meat, but it tasted like a feast. Zelda lay back in the grass, staring up at the impossibly blue sky, and felt something like peace. "Why did you leave wherever you came from?" Owen asked. He was sitting nearby, his long legs stretched out, his hair loose around his shoulders. Zelda tensed. "That's a complicated question. You do not have to answer, but I would like to know. I would like to know you." She sat up, hugging her knees. "I was engaged to my employer. He seemed kind at first, but he was not. He was cruel, controlling, violent." She touched her shoulder without thinking. "He hurt me. When I tried to leave, he shot me. I survived. I ran. I've been running since." The words hung in the air. Zelda waited for judgment, for pity, for all the reactions she dreaded. But Owen just nodded slowly. Is that what you hide under your high collars? He asked gently. Scars? Tears pricked her eyes. Yes. Does it still hurt? Sometimes, more than I let on. Your salve helps, though, more than anything else I've tried. Owen was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I have scars too. Everyone who has lived carries them. Some are just more visible than others. He stood and crossed to her, then knelt in the grass so they were level. May I? He asked, gesturing to her collar. Zelda's breath caught. Why? Because I want to see. Because scars are nothing to be ashamed of. They are proof you survived. They are maps of where you have been. His words reached something deep inside her. Slowly, with shaking hands, Zelda unbuttoned the top buttons of her dress and pulled the fabric aside, exposing her left shoulder and the network of scars. The bullet wounds, the cuts, all of it laid bare in the mountain sunlight. Owen studied them carefully, his expression unreadable. Then, so gently it made her want to cry, he reached out and traced the worst of the scars with his fingertips. His touch was feather-light, reverent. This one, he said, touching the bullet wound. This is where you learned you were strong enough to survive something that should have killed you. He moved to another scar, a long, thin line across her collarbone. This one is where you learned you were brave enough to keep going even when it was easier to give up. He traced another and another, naming each one, finding strength and courage in every mark. Zelda was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face, because no one had ever looked at her scars and seen anything but damage. They are maps, Owen said softly. They show where you have been, what you have survived. They are beautiful because they are part of you. And you are beautiful. Then he leaned forward and pressed his lips to the worst of the scarring, the puckered crater above her collarbone. The kiss was chaste, gentle, but it sent electricity through every nerve in Zelda's body. He kissed another scar and another, his lips warm against her skin. He was worshiping her damage, honoring her survival, and Zelda felt something fundamental shift inside her. The shame she had carried for so long began to crack apart, replaced by something bright and fierce. Owen, she whispered. He pulled back, his blue eyes searching hers. Is this all right? Yes. She reached up and cupped his face, feeling the roughness of his beard against her palm. Yes. He kissed her then, really kissed her, his lips finding hers with a tenderness that stole her breath. Zelda kissed him back, pouring into it all the loneliness and fear and desperate hope she had been carrying. His arms came around her, so strong and sure, and she felt protected in a way she never had before. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Owen rested his forehead against hers. I am not good with words, he said. I do not know how to say what I feel, but I look at you and I see someone brave and strong and worthy of being cared for. I want to care for you if you will let me. I want that too, Zelda said, but I am afraid. The last man who said he cared for me nearly killed me. I am not him. I will never hurt you. I will protect you with everything I have. Owen pulled back enough to look into her eyes. I know you do not know me well enough to trust that yet, but I will prove it to you every day for as long as it takes. Zelda believed him. Against all logic, against all her carefully built defenses, she believed him. I want to try, she said. I want to let myself care for someone again. For you. Owen's smile was like sunrise. He kissed her again, softer this time, and Zelda felt the last of her walls beginning to crumble. They spent the rest of the day in the meadow, talking and laughing and learning each other. Owen told her about his childhood, split between his mother's Apache relatives and his father's trapping camps. He had learned to survive in two worlds, never quite belonging to either, until he had given up and made his own world in the high country. Zelda told him about her family, long dead from influenza when she was 15, about the series of positions she had held, always moving, never quite finding a place to belong, about Edward and the nightmare he had been, the way she had thought she deserved his cruelty because she had nowhere else to go. You deserve kindness, Owen said firmly. You deserve to be cherished. Any man who treats a woman as less than precious is no man at all. As the sun began to set, painting the meadow in shades of amber and rose, they packed up and began the ride back to Placitus. Zelda was exhausted, but happy. her heart fuller than it had been in years. Owen rode close beside her, and whenever the trail narrowed, his hand would brush hers, a constant reassurance of his presence. Back in town, he helped her down from the mule and walked her to the boarding house door. Pemberton was already inside, probably drinking, and Zelda was grateful for a few more minutes of privacy. "When can I see you again?" she asked. "Whenever you want. I'm here for another week, trading pelts and resupplying. After that, I return to my cabin for the summer. But I come to town every few weeks." A week. Then he would be gone, and she would be traveling with Pemberton to the next town, the next commission. The thought made her chest ache. "I do not want you to go." "I do not want to go either." Owen tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "But I will be back, and we can write if you stay in one place long enough. Pemberton keeps us moving. We never stay more than a few weeks anywhere." They looked at each other, the problem obvious. Owen lived in the mountains, tied to the land and his trade. Zelda traveled constantly, tied to Pemberton and the work that kept her fed. There was no easy solution. "We will figure it out," Owen said, though Zelda could hear the uncertainty beneath the confidence. I am not letting you go, Zelda Sutherland, not now that I have found you." He kissed her goodnight, slow and sweet, then waited until she was safely inside before mounting his horse and riding into the darkness. Zelda stood at her window, watching until he disappeared, her fingers pressed to her lips. The next week was a strange sort of agony. Zelda was caught between joy and dread, wanting to spend every moment with Owen, while simultaneously knowing their time was limited. He came to the boarding house each evening after his trading was done, and they would walk through Placitas together, talking and holding hands like proper courting people. Pemberton noticed, of course, and made his displeasure known. "You're making a spectacle of yourself with that savage," he hissed one morning. "It reflects poorly on me." "Owen is not a savage," Zelda said quietly. "He is kind and decent, which is more than I can say for most men." Pemberton's face darkened. "You forget yourself, girl. I can replace you easily enough." "Then do so." The words were out before Zelda could stop them, fueled by a new courage Owen had helped awaken. "If you are so dissatisfied with my work, find someone else." For a moment she thought Pemberton would strike her. His hand actually rose and Zelda flinched back. But then Owen's voice cut through the tension. "I would not do that if I were you." He stood in the doorway, all 6.5 feet of muscle and controlled fury. Pemberton lowered his hand slowly, his expression caught between rage and fear. "This is none of your concern," Pemberton said. "Anything involving Zelda is my concern." Owen stepped into the room, and suddenly it felt much smaller. "You will not raise your hand to her again. You will not speak to her with disrespect. You will treat her as the skilled assistant she is, and pay her fairly for her work. Do you understand? You cannot tell me how to run my business. I just did." Owen's voice was soft, dangerous. "And if you have a problem with that, we can discuss it outside." Pemberton was many things, but he was not stupid. He looked at Owen, at the barely leashed violence in his posture, and backed down. "Fine, whatever you say, just get out of my sight." Owen looked at Zelda. "Do you want to stay here?" It was the question she had been avoiding. Did she want to stay working for Pemberton, enduring his moods and demands, traveling constantly with no home of her own? Or did she want something different? "No," she said slowly. "I do not think I do." "Then pack your things. You are coming with me." "Owen, I cannot just leave. I have obligations." "You have a bastard employer who treats you terribly." Owen crossed to her and took her hands. "You have skills. You know photography. You could set up on your own, take your own commissions, or you could do something else entirely. But you do not have to stay here." "Where would I go?" "With me, to my cabin. Stay the summer. Stay longer if you want. Figure out what you want your life to be. I will help you." He glanced at Pemberton. "How much does he owe you in wages?" 2 months, Zelda said. "He was supposed to pay me after the wedding." Owen turned to Pemberton. "Pay her, now." "I do not have that much cash on hand." "Then you have 1 hour to get it. I will wait." Owen sat down in the room's single chair, crossed his arms, and stared at Pemberton with unblinking intensity. The photographer fled, muttering curses. Owen looked at Zelda, his expression softening. You do not have to come with me if you do not want to. I will help you regardless, get you to another town, set up somewhere, but I would like you to come. I would like to show you my home, my life. See if it could be yours too." Zelda's heart was pounding. This was happening so fast, too fast. But then she thought about another year of traveling with Pemberton, of hiding her scars and making herself small. She thought about the peace she had felt in Owen's meadow, the way he had kissed her damage and called it beautiful. "I want to come," she said. "I'm terrified, but I want to." Owen's smile could have lit the world. He stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was precious. "You will not regret it. I promise." Pemberton returned with the money, counting it out with poor grace. Zelda packed her few belongings while Owen stood guard. It all fit into a single bag, which was both liberating and sad. 22 years of life, and this was all she had to show for it. "You are making a mistake," Pemberton said as they prepared to leave. "You will come crawling back within a month." "No," Zelda said clearly, "I will not." They walked out together, and Zelda felt lighter with every step. Owen had already arranged for his horse and the mule, and he helped her up before mounting himself. As they rode out of Placitas, Zelda looked back once at the small town, then turned her face forward, toward the mountains and whatever came next. The ride to Owen's cabin took most of the day. They followed trails that were barely visible, climbing higher and higher into the wilderness. The air grew cooler, sweeter, thick with the scent of pine. They passed through aspen groves and across clear streams, and Zelda saw wildlife everywhere. Elk grazing in meadows, hawks circling overhead, once a black bear watching from a distance before ambling away. "Are there many bears?" Zelda asked nervously. "Some. They usually leave you alone if you are smart about food storage. I will teach you." "What else do I need to know?" "Everything." Owen glanced back at her, his eyes warm. "But we have time. I'm a good teacher, and I think you are a good student." They arrived at the cabin as the sun was setting. It was larger than Zelda had expected, built of solid logs with a stone chimney and real glass windows. It sat in a clearing surrounded by towering pines, with a view down the mountain that took her breath away. There was a barn for the animals, a smokehouse, a root cellar. Owen had built himself a genuine homestead. "You did all this yourself?" Zelda asked, awed. "Over 2 years. It's not fancy, but it's mine. Ours now, if you want it." Inside, the cabin was simple but comfortable. There was a main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area, a table, and chairs. A ladder led up to a sleeping loft. Everything was clean and well-maintained, which surprised Zelda until she remembered Owen's care with their photographic equipment, the gentleness in his large hands. "There is only one bed," Owen said, and Zelda could hear the nervousness in his voice. "I can sleep by the fire if you prefer. I do not want you to feel pressured." Zelda set down her bag and turned to face him. He looked uncertain, this massive mountain man who could break bones with his bare hands, worried about making her uncomfortable. Her heart swelled with affection. "I do not want you to sleep by the fire," she said. "I want you with me. I want to fall asleep next to you and wake up next to you. I want all of it, Owen." He crossed to her in 2 long strides and kissed her with a passion that had been building all week. Zelda kissed him back, her fingers tangling in his long hair, her body pressing against the solid wall of his chest. She felt his hands on her waist, careful even in desire, and she pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "I am not fragile," she said. "I will not break." "I know, but I want to be careful with you anyway. You are precious to me." He kissed her throat, her jaw, the sensitive spot behind her ear. His hands roamed her back, her sides, learning the shape of her. Zelda gasped, pleasure racing through her nervous system. It had been so long since touch meant anything but pain, and Owen's touch was revelation. They undressed each other slowly, Zelda's fingers fumbling with the buttons of his shirt until it fell away, revealing the muscled expanse of his chest and abdomen. He was scarred too, she saw. Claw marks from an animal, the puckered circle of an old bullet wound, burns on his forearm, each mark a story, a moment survived. She traced them with her fingers, then her lips, giving him back what he had given her in the meadow. Owen shuddered under her touch, his breath coming faster. When he pulled off her dress and saw the full extent of her scars in the firelight, his expression was one of tenderness, not revulsion. Beautiful, he murmured, and proceeded to prove it, kissing every inch of damaged skin until Zelda was trembling and breathless and certain that she had never felt more desired in her life. They made love slowly, carefully, Owen letting Zelda set the pace. It was nothing like the brutal encounters with Edward, which had been about control and pain. This was about connection, about two scarred people finding solace in each other. When they finally came together, Zelda felt something fundamental click into place, as though she had been wandering lost and had finally found home. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the loft bed, Owen's large body curved protectively around hers. Zelda traced patterns on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. "I did not know it could be like that," she said quietly. "Like what?" "Gentle, good, like it mattered that I was enjoying it too." Owen tightened his arms around her. "It matters more than anything. Making love should be about both people, about caring for each other." Edward said I was cold, that I was not capable of passion. Edward was a fool and a liar. Owen kissed the top of her head. "You are passionate and responsive and perfect. He was just too cruel and selfish to deserve your passion." Zelda felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, cleansing. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me, for wanting me despite everything." "Not despite, because." Owen tilted her face up to his. "Your scars are part of you. They shaped you. They made you strong and brave and beautiful. I would not change anything about you." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other, and Zelda slept without nightmares for the first time in over a year. The summer that followed was the happiest of Zelda's life. Owen taught her everything about mountain living, how to tend the small garden he kept, how to preserve food for winter, how to track animals and identify plants, how to shoot both rifle and pistol until she could hit a target consistently, how to move quietly through the forest, reading the signs all around them. Zelda proved to be a quick study, her photographer's eye for detail serving her well. She learned to love the rhythm of the days, the honest work, the simple pleasures. She learned to love the silence, too, the way she and Owen could spend hours working side by side without needing to fill the air with chatter. But they talked, too, long conversations by the fire at night. Owen told her stories of his childhood, the legends his mother had shared, the skills his father had taught him. Zelda told him about her dreams, the things she had wanted before life had taken those choices away. She had always wanted to learn photography properly, to be an artist in her own right. She had wanted a home, a family, a place to belong. "You can have those things," Owen said. "You can learn photography. I will help you get equipment, chemicals, whatever you need. You have a home here if you want it, and a family." He paused. "If you want that with me." Zelda's heart swelled. "I want all of it. I want everything with you." As summer deepened into autumn, they fell into an even deeper rhythm. Owen went on longer hunting trips, bringing back elk and deer to smoke and preserve. Zelda kept the homestead running, tended the garden, practiced her shooting. She missed Owen when he was gone, but she was no longer afraid of being alone. She was becoming self-sufficient, confident in her abilities. When he returned from trips, their reunions were passionate and tender. They made love under the stars, in the meadows, anywhere the mood struck them. Owen continued to worship her scars, kissing them every time, reminding her that she was beautiful. Gradually, Zelda began to believe it. One evening in late September, as they sat by the fire, Owen reached into his pocket and pulled out a small carved box. He handed it to Zelda, his expression nervous. "What is this?" she asked. "Open it." Inside was a ring, simple but beautiful. A silver band with a small turquoise stone, the blue-green of a summer sky. "Zelda Sutherland," Owen said, taking her hand. "Will you marry me? Will you be my wife? Build a life with me here in these mountains? I know I am not sophisticated or educated. I know I cannot give you cities or society or fine things, but I can give you my whole heart. I can give you loyalty and protection and love for as long as I live. I can give you a home where you will always be safe, always be cherished. If that is enough, if I am enough, then please say yes." Zelda was crying, but they were happy tears. "You are more than enough. You are everything. Yes, Owen Ironwood, yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Then he kissed her, deep and long and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I will make you happy," he vowed. "Every day for the rest of our lives, I will work to make you happy." "You already do," Zelda said, "just by being you." They were married in Placitas a month later, in the small church with Mrs. Chen and the proprietor of the general store as witnesses. Zelda wore a simple blue dress that matched her ring, and Owen wore his best clothes, his hair tied back. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed Zelda like she was the only woman in the world. After the ceremony, they had a simple meal at the boarding house, then rode back to their cabin in the mountains. Their cabin, their home. Zelda felt a contentment she had never imagined possible. She had a husband who loved her, a place to belong, and a future that was theirs to shape. That winter was hard but beautiful. The snow fell deep, and they were snowed in for weeks at a time. But the cabin was warm and well-stocked, and Zelda had never felt safer. She and Owen spent the long, dark evenings by the fire, talking and reading and making love. Owen taught her to play chess, and Zelda taught him to read better, working through the few books they had. In the spring, Owen surprised her with photographic equipment he had traded for during a trip to Santa Fe. A camera, glass plates, chemicals, everything she needed. Zelda cried when she saw it, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. "You can be a photographer," Owen said. "Take pictures of the mountains, the wildlife, us, whatever you want. And when we go to town, you can take commissions, be your own employer." Zelda threw her arms around him, holding tight. "Thank you. Thank you for believing in me, for giving me this chance. You do not need to thank me. You deserve to pursue your dreams. I want to help you achieve them." Zelda threw herself into photography with passion. She learned by trial and error, wasting plates and chemicals, but gradually improving. Owen was a patient model, though he still disliked being photographed. She took pictures of the landscape, the changing seasons, the wildlife. She was developing an artist's eye, and her work was good, getting better all the time. When they went to Placitas that summer, Zelda set up as a photographer, and people came. They wanted portraits, photographs of their children, their homes. Word spread, and soon she had more work than she could handle. Owen was proud of her, and Zelda felt pride in herself too. She was making money, contributing to their life together. One evening in late summer, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold, Zelda placed Owen's hand on her still flat belly. "We are going to have a baby," she said softly. Owen went very still. Then a smile broke across his face, bright as sunshine. Truly, in the spring, I think." He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was made of glass. "A baby. Our baby." "Are you happy?" Zelda asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. "I am more than happy. I am blessed." Owen pulled back enough to look at her. "You have given me everything, Zelda. A home, a purpose, a reason to be something more than I was, and now a child. I do not have words for what I feel." "Then just hold me," Zelda said. "That is enough." He did, and they watched the stars come out together, two scarred people who had found healing in each other, preparing to bring new life into the world. Their son was born in April of 1883 during a late spring snowstorm that blanketed the mountains in white. Owen delivered the baby himself, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he helped Zelda through the ordeal. When he placed the squalling infant in her arms, Zelda felt her heart expand to hold yet more love. "He is perfect," she breathed, counting tiny fingers and toes. "He has your eyes," Owen said, wonder in his voice. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months, never quite agreeing, but looking at her son, Zelda knew. "James," she said. "After your father, James Ironwood." Owen's eyes filled with tears. He would have been honored. Little James was a strong baby, healthy and loud. He had Owen's size growing faster than seemed possible, and Zelda's curiosity examining everything with intense focus. Zelda photographed him constantly, documenting every stage of his growth. Owen was a devoted father, carrying the baby in a sling while he worked, singing to him in a mixture of English and Apache, teaching him the names of things before he could even understand. The years flowed past in a current of happiness. James grew into a sturdy toddler, then a wild boy who loved the mountains as much as his father did. Zelda's photography business flourished. She was known throughout the territory as a skilled artist, and people traveled to Placidus specifically to commission her work. Owen continued his trapping and hunting, but also began guiding hunters and tourists who wanted to see the wilderness, teaching them the respect it demanded. In 1886, Zelda gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Sarah, both healthy and loud. Owen was outnumbered by females now, he joked, but he could not have been happier. The cabin had been expanded, with rooms added for the growing family. It was full of noise and laughter and the organized chaos of children. James was protective of his little sisters, just as Owen was protective of all of them. He was 7 now, tall for his age, with his father's blue eyes and his mother's artistic eye. He was learning photography from Zelda, learning wilderness skills from Owen, growing into a fine young man. One summer evening, as they all sat on the porch after dinner, James asked the question Zelda had been expecting for years. "Mama, what are those marks on your shoulder?" The twins were too young to understand, playing with dolls in the corner, but James was old enough, smart enough. Zelda glanced at Owen, who nodded encouragement. She unbuttoned her collar and showed James the scars, now silvered with age but still visible. "These are from before I met your father," she said carefully. "From a man who hurt me because he was bad and cruel. But I survived, and I got away, and that is how I ended up here." James studied the scars with serious eyes. "Did Papa save you?" "In a way, but mostly I saved myself. Your Papa helped me see that I was strong enough to choose a different life." "They look like a map," James said, tracing one of the longer scars, "like the maps Papa draws of the trails." Zelda's breath caught. She looked at Owen, whose eyes were bright with emotion. "Your Papa said something similar once. He said scars are maps of where we have been, what we have survived." "Then they are good," James declared, "because they brought you here, to Papa and to us." Zelda hugged her son, her heart too full for words. Owen joined them, wrapping his large arms around both of them, and the twins abandoned their dolls to pile on as well, until they were all tangled together, laughing. That night, after the children were asleep, Owen and Zelda lay in their bed, holding each other as they had for years now. "Thank you," Zelda said softly. "For what?" "For everything. For seeing past my scars. For loving me when I could not love myself. For giving me this life, this family." Owen kissed her forehead. "I did not give you anything. You built this life. You chose to be brave, to leave Pemberton, to come with me. You chose to heal, to learn, to love again. All I did was provide a safe place for you to become who you were always meant to be." "We did it together," Zelda corrected. "You showed me what love could be, what it should be, patient and kind and generous. You showed me the same. I was alone for so long, I had forgotten what it was like to be part of something larger. You gave me a family, a reason to be more than a man surviving in the wilderness." They kissed, slow and sweet, a kiss of deep familiarity and enduring passion. Outside, the wind moved through the pines, and somewhere an owl called. Inside, their children slept safe and warm, and Owen and Zelda held each other, 2 maps that had found their way home. The years continued their steady march. James grew tall and strong, inheriting his father's size and his mother's artistic temperament. He became an accomplished photographer and tracker, able to move between the world of art and the world of wilderness with equal ease. The twins grew into lively young women, Emma becoming a teacher in Placitas, Sarah marrying a rancher and settling nearby. Owen's hair went gray at the temples, then white. He moved a bit slower, his joints aching in winter. But he was still strong, still capable, still the protective presence he had always been. Zelda's hair silvered too, and laugh lines appeared around her eyes and mouth. Her scars faded more with each year, until they were barely visible, just faint lines on weathered skin. They were in their 50s now, grandparents several times over. The cabin had become a gathering place for their growing family, full of grandchildren and laughter and the chaos of holidays. Zelda's photography had evolved into teaching, and she ran workshops out of Placitas for aspiring photographers. Owen had mostly retired from trapping, but still guided occasionally, his knowledge of the mountains unmatched. One autumn evening, on the anniversary of the day they met, Owen took Zelda back to the meadow where he had first kissed her scars. It was harder to make the ride now, their bodies not as young as they once were, but they managed. They spread a blanket in the same spot, now golden with autumn grass, and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of fire. "Do you ever regret it?" Owen asked, "leaving everything behind, coming here with me?" "Never," Zelda said firmly. "Not for a single moment. This life, with you, has been everything I ever wanted and more than I ever dared to dream. I think about that day often, how close I came to just riding past Placitas, never stopping. If I had been a day earlier or later, we might never have met. But you did stop, and we did meet, and everything that came after was meant to be." Zelda took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "You taught me that my scars were nothing to be ashamed of, that they were part of my story, part of what made me strong. You helped me heal, Owen, not just my body, but my heart and soul. You did the same for me. I was alone for so long, I thought that was all I deserved. You showed me I was worthy of love, worthy of family. You gave me a life I never knew I wanted." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear. The same stars that had witnessed their first kiss, their wedding, the birth of their children. The same stars that would continue long after they were gone, shining down on their descendants, on the life they had built. "I love you, Zelda Ironwood," Owen said. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you struggling with that crate, trying to be strong even though you were hurting. I will love you until my last breath and beyond if such things are possible." "I love you too," Zelda replied. "My mountain man, my protector, my home." He kissed her then, and it was like the first time and the 1,000th time all at once. When they finally rode back to the cabin, the lights were on, because James and his family were visiting, because the twins had dropped by with their husbands and children. The cabin was full of noise and warmth and love. Owen and Zelda stood on the porch for a moment, looking through the windows at the family they had created, the legacy of two scarred people who had found each other in the wild places and chosen to build something beautiful. "We did good," Owen said. "We did very good," Zelda agreed. They went inside together, hand in hand, to join the celebration, to share a meal with their children and grandchildren, to tell stories and laugh and simply be together. Because that was what mattered, not the scars they carried or the hard roads they had traveled, but the love they had found, the family they had built, the home they had made. Years later, when they were old and gray and their bodies were failing, Owen and Zelda would sit on that same porch, watching the mountains they had loved for a lifetime. They would hold hands and remember the young people they had been, so damaged and afraid. They would marvel at how far they had come, how much they had built, and when the time came, as it does for everyone, they would face it together. Owen would go first, peacefully in his sleep, with Zelda holding his hand. She would grieve, as anyone would grieve the loss of a great love, but she would also celebrate the life they had shared, the 50 years they had been granted. James would find her on the porch one morning, 6 months after Owen's passing, her hand resting on the carved chair arm where Owen's hand had so often rested beside hers. She had passed in the night, peacefully, her face serene. And though James wept for the loss of his mother, he knew she was where she wanted to be, reunited with the man who had kissed her scars and called them maps, who had loved her without reservation, who had given her a life beyond her wildest dreams. They buried her next to Owen, on a hill overlooking the meadow where they had first confessed their love. The headstone was simple, bearing both their names and the dates that bookended their lives. But beneath, James had carved a line that captured everything they had been to each other. 2 maps that found their way home. The cabin remained in the family for generations, passed down from James to his children to their children. The photographs Zelda had taken lined the walls, a visual history of a family built on love and resilience. And though the people in those photographs eventually faded from living memory, their story endured. The story of a photographer's assistant who had fled violence and found healing. Of a mountain man who had lived alone until he found someone worth sharing his life with. Of 2 people who looked at each other's scars and saw not damage, but strength. Not shame, but survival. Not endings, but maps that showed where they had been and pointed toward where they were going. Together. always together. And in the mountains of New Mexico, where the wind still moves through the pines and the stars still shine bright, their love story echoes throh time. A reminder that healing is possible, that love can be gentle and fierce and enduring, that scars are nothing to hide, but rather marks of honor, proof that we survived, that we kept going, that we were brave enough to choose life over despair. Owen and Zelda Ironwood had been those brave souls. They had taken their damaged hearts and scarred bodies and built something beautiful. They had raised children and grandchildren who knew what real love looked like. They had lived fully and loved deeply and left the world better than they found it. And though their time on earth was finite, as all our times are, what they created together was infinite. Love that would ripple forward through the generations. Lessons that would be passed down, stories that would be told and retold until they became legend. The story of the mountain man and the photographer's assistant. The story of how he kissed every scar and called them maps. The story of two people who found each other in the wilderness and chose to build a home, a family, a legacy. It was a story of the Wild West, of survival and strength. But more than that, it was a love story. The kind that reminds us all that no matter how damaged we feel, no matter how marked by life, we are worthy of love. We are worthy of happiness. We are worthy of someone who will look at our scars and see beauty, who will kiss our damage and call it art, who will choose us every day for the rest of their lives. Owen and Zelda found that in each other, and in doing so, they proved that healing is possible. That love can be the balm for even the deepest wounds, that two broken people can come together and create something whole, something perfect, something eternal. Their descendants still live in New Mexico, still tell their story, still visit the cabin on the mountain where it all began. They bring their own children and grandchildren, pointing out the photographs on the walls, tracing the history of their family back to those two people who met in Plazitas in 1881 and changed each other's lives forever. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the light is just right, people swear they can see two figures on the cabin porch, a tall man with long hair and a smaller woman with silver in her own hair, sitting close together, holding hands, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold, looking at each other with the kind of love that transcends death, that echoes through eternity. Maps that found their way home, scars that became art, love that conquered fear and pain and damage to create something beautiful and lasting and true. That was the legacy of Owen and Zelda Ironwood. That was their story. And it was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth celebrating for all the generations that would come after. A reminder that love, real love, the kind that heals and strengthens and endures, is always worth fighting for. Always worth choosing, always worth celebrating, and somewhere in the mountains of New Mexico, where the wild things still roam and the stars still shine bright, that love continues. Not ended, but transformed. Not forgotten, but remembered. Not lost, but eternal. Forever and always, two maps that found their way home.